So first, let's talk about building applications and integrating with APIs. You have probably seen a slide similar to that over the last decade when cloud computing came out, right? There was a slide like that where they would tell you, well, if you're building your application, you can, of course, have everything on premises with the servers, the hardware, the network, the electricity, or you can rent a rack in a private hosted company, or you can use cloud services, and so on and so forth, right? So think of that as the same analogy, but for integrating with APIs. When you want to integrate with an API, you have many things you need to take into account. It's not just about querying the REST endpoint and getting the data back. The first thing that you need to, most often, which is the most difficult to take care of, is the authentication. How do you authenticate to the API? How do you make sure that you are securely accessing the data? And usually that's a hurdle. Usually that's a bit hard to do. The other things that you don't necessarily think about are the middleware, which is things like, hey, if I'm being throttled with a 429 answer response code, what should I do? Should I retry? Should I retry after a couple of seconds? And so on and so forth. Or how should I handle compression of a payload and of the response? Or how should I handle redirections? All those things are really, really, really important to implement properly, so you have a great API integration, so your application works well. But it's time-consuming and it's complex to do. Of course, when you talk to REST APIs, another thing which is really important is the models. So if I have a user, object, entity, class, whatever you want to name it, on the API, well, I need to build a user, entity, object, class in my application, and I need to make sure I map the properties properly, I handle serialization, deserialization, all of that is time-consuming and complex. And then there is request factories. When you build the request to query the endpoint, you can, of course, just use the URL and use just that to query the endpoint, but that's sensitive because you can have typos in the URL can change for some reason, and it can be pretty cumbersome to just use strings and URLs like that. And lastly, which is what you do when you ship your application, you have to package it up, right? And of course, you can do all of it by hand. It will be the equivalent for a pizza if you have some flour, have some water, have some ingredients, you cook everything, you bake the pizza, and you have your pizza at the end of the day. But it's a lot of work to get a pizza at the end of the day. It's a valid option if you want control over everything, but it's a lot of work. Another approach that you can take is say, all right, I'm going to use an augmented client that does all the middleware stuff, so retry handling, compression handling, authentication, and so on and so forth. But the rest of the stack, I'm going to do it myself. So think of it about a bit like when you go to the supermarket, you buy some dough that is pre-cooked. You just need to put the dough, put the ingredients that are pre-sliced for you, and there you have a pizza. It's faster time to market. It's a bit less work. You have a bit less control. But again, it's a valid approach as well. The next one, which is the one we'll be focusing on today, is a self-serve client, a self-serve generated client, where on top of having the cross-cutting concerns implemented for you in the core library, you also have things like models, request factories, serialization and deserialization handled for you. And the way it's handled for you is because the code is being generated for you, and you don't need to handcraft that code. And when you do that, you have lots of control over what you want in terms of API surface, but you don't have to do all the work. And it's a very good trade-off. It will be the equivalent of showing up to the restaurant and say, I want a pizza, please. And then you go home, right? And then the last thing, this is what my team does, is if you take an SDK from an API, if you go to GitHub, if you go to Microsoft Graph, if you go to Twilio, who's sponsoring today, they have these SDKs for you available in some languages. So you just go there, download the package, figure out how it works, integrate it with your application. And that's also a very valid option or approach to doing so. It's a bit of equivalent of just calling the place and asking for a pizza to be delivered, to put things in perspectives. All those four options are very valid. It's just a trade-off. The more you go on the left, the more control you have, but the more responsibilities come with that. And the more on the right you go, the less control you have, and you need to learn each SDK for each API. So today we're going to be focusing on the third one, which is I'm going to be generating my clients the way I like them, based on an API description, And they are going to feel and behave the same regardless of the API I'm talking to. Sounds good? Oh, come on, more energy, guys. The coffee, what's going on with the coffee? Sounds good? Ah, better. Thank you very much. All right, I've already talked to some of those points, but why would you generate clients? Well, first, you don't need to do the work for models, serialization, deserialization anymore. You avoid mistakes. It's a lot of work that you don't have to do anymore. You can have, in some cases, in the case of Kiota, which is a product I'm going to be showing in a couple of minutes, you have a chain-style API surface to build a request. So you get compile time validation, auto-completion, and other nice features that we'll see during the demonstration. It standardizes the approach. So if you talk to the GitHub API, if you talk to Microsoft Graph, if you talk to Twilio, you only need to learn how the client feels and how to build your request once. You don't need to learn to do that once per API, which saves you time and also makes for a more consistent experience. It automates repetitive work, and we developers, we are what? Lazy, yay! So when we can skip some work and focus on the things that actually matter, it's more productive for us, but also for the companies that we work for. And overall, that leads to better quality clients, better quality applications, and you focusing on what matters, your added value, not integrating with a specific API. So now, introducing Microsoft Kiota, cue the confetti and everything. So it's an open source client generator that is based on OpenAPI. If you don't know about OpenAPI, it is okay. OpenAPI is a standard that was created a few years ago, and it basically allows you to describe on any API, there is an endpoint at this place, it takes those parameters in, it returns that kind of payload. It is very prescriptive about what the API does and how to integrate with that API. So we use that as the source of truth to generate clients, to generate code for our applications. We started that in 2021. It's currently in public preview, and what it will do for you is generate models and a chain-style API surface for you to be able to query any API effectively. In a nutshell, you will get clients that are easy to use, secure, flexible, resilient, performant, and so on and so forth. And why have we set out to build a new generator when other generators already exist in the market? Well, we believe that we are delivering an improved developer experience through the kind of clients we're generating. And that's up for you to judge when you go home and try Kiota on your own time. We have more languages support than we used to have for Microsoft Graph products, at least. We support more API features. OpenAPI as a standard, which relies on JSON schema, can be very complex in certain ways, and a lot of generators out there have chosen to skip the implementation of some features when it says in the standard, you should do that, you should do this. Because it's too complex, some generators have chosen to skip that altogether. We have been thorough through our implementation, and we believe we support more cases than most generators out there. And it will allow you to build your self-serve experience as you query new APIs and build new clients. So how does it work with Kiota? So Kiota is first and foremost a CLI, although I have an announcement specific for the conference here to make at the end of a session. And the way you go about that is you have a couple of commands. First, you will start with a search command. Today, I want to query GitHub API, for example. All right, let's see if there is an OpenAPI description for GitHub. After that, you can use the show command to see what API paths are available on the API and filter them down to just what you care about. So you don't get an overblown client. You just get the client that you need and that you care about eventually. After that, you can use the generate command to know, to generate your client. And that generate client, of course, takes in the filters that you've built and so on and so forth. So you get a client that is only specific to your needs. And the last command is the info command that tells you, now that you're done generating, here are the list of dependencies that you need to install in your project. Sounds good so far? Any questions so far before I start typing like crazy? Yeah? Okay. All right, so now comes the time for the demo. Let me put that here. So today, together, we'll be building an application. But if I go back here, does a couple of things. Who uses GitHub? Almost everybody. Awesome. So you know what are those, right? They are pull requests. How many of you, sometimes because they get busy, forget about checking some pull requests that have been sent to them? Like sometimes your coworker or in your open source project, people send you pull requests and you don't check them because you forgot about those, you missed the notification. Come on, you liars, I want to see more hands here. Right. All right. Now, so that's for the, one API of the demonstration. Then the second API we'll talk about is, of course, Microsoft Graph. And who knows what To Do is, Microsoft To Do? Almost everybody? I'm impressed. Right, so for the others, Microsoft To Do is an application that allows you to track your tasks. You can put a bunch of tasks, put them in lists, and make sure you keep track of your work, and it makes you organized and more productive this way. So what we'll do today is we'll build an application that talks to the GitHub API to get the pull requests that are open, that I need to review, right? And then it will talk to the To Do API to put tasks and set reminders for me so I don't forget about those pull requests. Sounds good? There was a problem with the coffee this morning. Do you think this sounds good? Yeah, perfect. All right. So I start my day. I'm a developer, of course. And when I'm building that application, I need to know, OK, how can I talk to the GitHub API? I have no idea. Of course, I can check their documentation. They have awesome documentation. But I'm a developer. I'm lazy. I never read the documentation, right? So I'm going to use Kiota to search for GitHub here. By using Kiota, search GitHub. So what that will do is it will query a number of different indices to see where can I find an OpenAPI description for GitHub. And it will tell me, well, I found all those results that you can see on the screen. Then it also gives me a couple of hints. If I don't know how to use Kiota, well, you'll see in blue, you will have those hint messages that tell you either how to use a command in a more advanced way or what's the next command you want to use. So let's try what is being suggested, which is search for a specific key in that case to see what we get. And here it tells you, all right, so this is the API for GitHub v3 REST API. Here's the contact if you need to contact somebody to ask some questions. And also here's where the OpenAPI specification is. And now we have two more hints, which are you can use Kiota show to show what's in the API, or you can use Kiota download to download the API description. We won't be doing that today. That's fine. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to use Kiota show here to see what's in the an API description. So what that will do is go grab the description and display for me a tree of all the endpoints. And you can see that the GitHub API is getting quite large, actually. If there's so many endpoints about repositories, pull requests, users, messages, and so on and so forth. And for the purpose of my application, I don't need all of those. I just need a subset of that, right? So what can I do about it? Well, if you look at the hint here, it will tell me that you can either use the show command again, but use this include path parameter here, or you can start generating. So before I start generating, I just want to make sure I have a client that's only tailored to my needs, and that I get what I need effectively. So I'm going to copy that command as well. And today we're trying to integrate with pull requests. So I'm going to use this mini-match pattern to say, let's find the endpoints that are about pull requests. That's better, right? It's a much smaller API surface. It looks like it's what I need. It's the pull request endpoint under the repo, under the owner path segments. But still, there is a comment thing that I'm not happy about. I don't need that comment thing. I'm not interested in that today. So what am I going to be doing is excluding also, because I can also exclude some endpoints thanks to the other filter. And I'm going to say, all right, you know what? If it says comments, I don't care about that. And I cannot type mini-match or type properly. It's a live demo. So yeah, I'm going to be able to exclude comments. That. That's fine if I do that. Oh, that's fine. We'll keep the comments for now. Sorry about that. It's a live demonstration. It happens sometimes. And now the next hint I'm getting is to generate. Now that I've been able to almost filter the endpoints to what I care about, I'll be able to generate a client just tailored to my needs. Let me try just one last thing. Comments. There we go, comments is gone. Yay, live demo, it works. So now that I have fixed my paths and my filters, I'm going to be able to generate my client. So how does that work? Well, I'm going to be using the generate command here, and I'm going to say first, the demonstration is going to be in C# in .NET. So first I'm going to be saying, all right, the language is in C# here, and then the output path is going to be, well, the current path, that's a shorthand in PowerShell, and GitHub, because I want to put it under the current project. And then I have a couple of other parameters that I can use. I can use the class or client class name parameter to say, you know what, the main client, the main thing you're creating, I want to give it a name so I know what to refer to when I start writing my code. So here I'm going to name it GitHub client here. And then the last thing I'm going to be using is the namespace name. So in any kind of programming language, you have packages, namespaces, or other things like that that allow you to organize your code. And when you have a project, you don't start out of a void. Your project already has some structure. And Kiota doesn't assume that, oh, no, that's fine, they'll change all the projects around just for us. Kiota doesn't make that assumption. So it gives you the opportunity to say, I work at Contoso, all my applications start with contoso.com.something. Well, the client that I'm going to be generating also starts with that, so it fits nicely with my code base. So it doesn't break my code base, and I have a nice integration, right? So here I'm going to say project name.github. Here, let me put some quotes because quotes are always the developer's friend, and we should have everything, right? So what's that going to do is it will pull, well, it's actually so fast, as you can see. It will pull the OpenAPI description, parse it, apply the filters to it, so it removes everything we don't care about, and then it will generate all the code in C# in that case, and put it where we asked it to put. And so if we list, here we can see that now we have a GitHub directory here that was not here before. Well, you can see I'm not lying because of a date here. And if we list that directory, now we have a couple of different things like our models, our API segmentation, the main client with the name I gave it, and so on and so forth. Right? Good so far? Good. So now I have one API, which is GitHub, where I'm going to be able to take the pull request from, but I also have to talk to a second API, which is Microsoft Graph, or suppose you don't know about Microsoft Graph. Suppose you only know about To-Do. You want to put stuff in To-Do, you don't know about Microsoft Graph. Well, I'm going to be doing the same thing using the search command here and say Kiota search To-Do and see what comes up. Well, there are two APIs that come up. There's Mastodon, which is something completely different, but there is something called Microsoft Graph. Well, you know that To-Do belongs to Microsoft or is built by Microsoft. That sounds like a good approach to go through. And through the same kind of logic, I will be able to generate my client. And I can do Kiota. I'm going to be going a bit faster here because you've already seen that. But Kiota-generate. So hold on, I need to do one thing first. Okay. I'm going to be building the filters first because it's always really important to filter things down. So Kiota show, I'm going to be using Microsoft Graph.msgraph -k like that. And then I know about the API because this is the API I work for, so I know the API segmentation the same way, but I'm going to be going faster because we already know this API by heart and build the filters myself directly. So when you talk to Microsoft Graph for tasks and you want to reach out to the personal user's tasks, it's under /me/todo/ something, the list in that case, and there you get the tasks. To get the tasks, I also need things like the lists. So I'm also going to include the list that live under to-do here. And I think that's all I need for now. Let's see what we get. So same thing, it's going to go download the OpenAPI description, parse it, generate a tree rendition of that API description, so I can see what I'm going to get when I generate afterwards, right? And that looks good. I have this tree that is represented, which is with a me endpoint. Under that, I have to do, I have a list, I have tasks, and so on and so forth. So that looks great. So again, I'm going to use the hint to help me here, and I'm going to use this hint to build my generation command. We're doing C# still. We haven't changed that part. I'm going to put it under here, the current directory again, Microsoft Graph, if I can type. And here I'm going to say it's going to be Microsoft Graph client, and then the namespace is going to be the project name dot Microsoft Graph, like that. Perfect. And so what's going to do, it's going to pull the description again, parse it, filter out everything we don't need, and generate the code for my graph client. There. Now that we have all of that, we can go to code here. And if I look at my project, this is a simple console application. I'm building a console application because it's easier to demo, but those clients that you can generate in many different languages could be for code that lives on the server side, a native application, on web apps, on front-end applications. It doesn't matter, right? It's just a console application because it's easier to demo, but the clients you generate can live anywhere for that matter, right? And so here what I have is default .NET console application, and under that I have my Microsoft Graph client here, my GitHub client here, something that I'll tell you about later here, and that's it, right? And a couple of constants, and that's it. But you can see it's in red, it's complaining. Well, why is it complaining? Probably because if I try to build, it will tell me, like that. If I try to build, it will tell me, well, you have a bunch of references, but I don't know about those, actually. There we go. Lots and lots and lots of errors, right? You can see going through, scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Of course, that's terrible. But if we go back to the console here, we had one last hint that we haven't used. It's the info command that tells me, well, if you need the list of dependencies you want to add to your project, use that info command here to get those. So I'm going to do that. And now it tells me, in a few seconds, it will tell me what dependencies do I need to add to my project. Because Kiota is not in the business of messing up your project. That's another thing that some generators do. They try to change your project files. They try to add the dependencies themselves. Sometimes they're not up to date with a project management format. And they get into situations where your project is messed up now. Great. No, we don't do that here. We tell you if you want, you can add those dependencies to be able to compile and build your application. And another thing which is important with Kiota is that we don't make any assumption in terms of which serialization format are you going to use, which serialization library you want to use, which authentication do you need to use, which authentication library do you need to use, and same thing for the HTTP library. So everything we generate, if you just take the first dependency here, which is the abstractions, you'll be able to build. You won't do anything because you need implementations for those things, but you will be able to build your project or mock it to test or do other things, right? But then, for your code to work and to actually do things in your application, you need implementations of those. Again, serialization, deserialization, and so on and so forth. We provide default implementations, and you're welcome to use them if you're happy with those. If you're not happy with those, you can, of course, come up with your own implementations and even contribute back. If you have, for example, the need for XML serialization, well, you can do that and contribute this back to the community, for example, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy all those commands to install the dependencies. It's going to take a couple of seconds. There we go, last one. And now we can see that if I build again here, at least I will get into a situation where my code should build. Come on, come on, come on, loading, the loading dance. There we go. So now we have all the dependencies we need, and they have been added to our project file here. Now it's time to actually do the fun part, which is writing the code. So what is the first thing you need to do when you start using new code or new things? Any idea? Usings? I heard it like somewhere here in the dark. Thank you very much. So the first thing we're going to be doing here is, when it loads, adding the usings. Come on, my computer hasn't had any coffee this morning. This is why it's starting to slowly wake up. There we go. Thank you, computer. So here I'm adding all the usings at the same time. I'll come back to that later, so we don't have to be trying to auto-resolve all the time. So here are all the things that I need to build my application. There are the clients that I just generated here. There are the models under the client. There are also the implementations of things I was telling you about earlier. We'll go through that together. So now, let's say my first task is to get the pull request. So how can I get the pull request? First, I need to build a client. And you can see that GitHub Copilot knows that I've been doing this demo a couple of times already. So let's try to get a GitHub client here. There we go. There we go. So if we look at the squiggles, it says, yeah, you're calling this constructor, but you need to pass a parameter. We'll come back to that later. We're just trying to explore the code and see how it works and see how the API works, right? For now. So now with this client thing, not graph, GitHub client, let's see what we have under that. Well, we have the standard .NET stuff, but what's interesting to us is we have this repos thing. That sounds good, right? I'll be able to address a repo. So now let's see with the auto-completion again what we have under that. Well, we don't have any methods, but we have this thing called an indexer in .NET. And if you don't know about .NET or if you don't know about indexers, we're effectively mapping an array entry to another call. So they allow me to pass a value and get a single result within a collection thanks to that. So let me use that. So it's effectively asking me for the repo name, but if I'm not sure, I can navigate here. I get the different things like the comments and so on. All of that is generated automatically for you by Kiota using the OpenAPI description. And you have compile time validation and all those kind of things. So here I know that I need to pass the owner name because a repo belongs to an owner first. And then if I do dot again, I have another indexer. Well, that's because an owner can have multiple repositories, right? And now let's dot my way through. Oh, I have something called pull, so that sounds interesting to get a pull request. So let's do that. And now, oh no, I have another indexer, but I don't know what the pull request ID is going to be. Probably when I built my filters, well, I probably forgot to include something that I absolutely need. That's perfectly fine. When you use Kiota, you can generate again and again and again and overwrite things until you fine-tune the things and you get the things that you need specifically. So let's go back to the terminal and fix that. So if I go back to my generation command here, which was this one for GitHub, I see that it has all those filters. But if I look at the mini-match pattern here, I'm getting everything under pull request, but I'm not getting the pulls endpoint itself, which would allow me to list the pull request, right? I'm fast forwarding a little bit right now, but this is what your investigation would lead you to discover. So let's add another include filter here, which is going to be just like that, to include just the pulls endpoint that allows me to list the pull request, and generate again. So again, grabbing the description, generating the client. I already have the dependencies, so I don't need to go through the dependencies, and that's it. So now if we go back to the code here, if I do dot again, you see that I have new things here. I have get async. That sounds great. I'm able to get the list of pull requests and get that information. Now, we're doing .NET, so or C#. There we go. So here I built myself a GitHub authentication provider that's going to be using device code flow as well. I'm passing that to the request adapter, like in the previous one, and then I'm passing this request adapter to the GitHub client. this request. There we go. So now it looks great. We have all the code to integrate both those things. Let's see if it actually works, right? So I'm going to be pressing F5 to start debugging. And the first thing that will show up is GitHub telling me, hey, you need to authenticate. Here's the code. Go there, authenticate. There we go. I know it's a bit small here, but it's what is in blue down below. Here you have a message that says that please go to github.com/login/device and enter the code with this code to authenticate. So I'm going to be doing that right now in the right browser. Of course, I cannot. There we go. Continue. Now GitHub is going to be telling me, hey, you're trying to log in from Santo Domingo with this IP. Is it OK? Are you OK with this application accessing your data? Of course, I'm OK with this application accessing my data. Now, also, everything is MFA today, so I have to go through the MFA from my phone. Come on, come on. This is the MFA dance. Ah, there we go, finally. There we go. So now we've been able to authenticate to the GitHub API, and my application has been able to query GitHub data. Now, what's going to happen is, because we're using the device code flow, but for Microsoft Graph this time, Microsoft is going to tell me the same thing. Here's the code, go to this URL, paste that code, and so on. So I'm going to be doing the exact same things to talk to Microsoft Graph this time. Authorize, continue, we're happy with that. And now my application will run through the pull requests, run through and create all the tasks in to-do. And if we're successful, we should have, maybe if I need to refresh. We should have, come on, tasks. Live demonstrations. Let me run through that one more time. There we go. There we go, authorize. Let me make sure I have some tasks. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the suggestion. So let's see that. I don't have a correct repo. I owe you a beer. Thank you very much. Everybody, Rick saving the day today. Let me fix that. So this is why you want a compile time check client, because now the only things where I can make mistakes are in the names of the repositories or the name or the different things, right? But imagine if I could make mistake through every and any URL. It would be a nightmare to debug and to fix. Now I can only make mistakes in those two things that are in red, which I should have checked earlier. But I cannot make a mistake, for example, in repos or pools or anything like that. This is one of the value of having a having a generated client. So now let's run it for real. Thank you very much, Rick. There we go. And now you can tell to your colleagues that you know what device code flow is about, because you've seen it already 3 times today. seriously. There we go. Going through that again. Now that we've been through that, we'll go through this for Microsoft Graph. Perfect. Perfect. And if we go to to-do, drum roll. There we go. Perfect. We see our to-do tasks with different things. Please, everybody, a round of applause for Rick. Thank you very much. So, when you can actually type properly and not make typos like I do, it's really easy to integrate multiple APIs using Kiota with a consistent experience with models and Fluent API and so on and so forth. If I click on that to-do task, you'll see a couple of things that I've set programmatically, like the expiration date, like if I want to open the pull request itself, I have a link here, right here, and so on and so forth, right? And you can imagine building so many different applications, talking to so many different APIs in a matter of minutes and not hours or days and so on and so forth. Before I jump back to the slides, I want to show you one quick thing. This thing is an experimentation at this point. We don't know where we're going with that. We'll see if the community likes that or not. But it's called app.kiota.dev here. This is Kiota. The same thing I've shown through the CLI, that same powerful technology, but running in the browser. No backend, your data is not going anywhere. The whole generator runs in the browser. So you can try today going to app.kiota.dev, and you can search for API descriptions, filter things through, generate clients, and so on and so forth. And if this is not powerful enough, because again, it's running in the browser, you can always revert back to the CLI and use the CLI also to generate your clients. Kiota is a preview product as a CLI. This is an experiment. Play with that. Give us feedback. Now, to go back to the slides, and to close this session. There we go. So that's for the demo. In conclusion, you can see that we've been able to integrate multiple APIs really quickly, really easily when you don't make typos. And let's talk about a bit about our roadmap. So if you work with Microsoft Graph, what you should know is all of our next generation SDKs are powered by Kiota right now. And we're working through to make sure that they'll be generally available in the next coming month. So the same generator that you can use for your applications, for your APIs, internal or public APIs, doesn't matter. You are able to, we are using to build Microsoft Graph clients that we ship to our customers and so on and so forth. So it's built to be reliable, and it's a product you can trust. We will eventually fix some metadata, integrate with another tool which is called Graph Explorer. If you know about it, great. If you don't know about it, that's fine. And then if we talk about Kiota specifically, we will work through the next few months to make sure that we make it generally available for a subset of languages, and also that we add more languages to the generator itself. Couple of call to actions for you. We'll try out Kiota, either the CLI version or the browser version. Give us feedback. It works, you're happy, awesome. Tell us that. It doesn't work, you're not happy, you want to yell at us. Do it as well. We really want to see what has been your experience with Kiota. If you talk to Microsoft Graph, try the next generation SDKs that we're building thanks to Kiota, and give us feedback, give us feedback, give us feedback. And with that, I've run out of time. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll stay a couple of minutes if you have a couple of questions. Otherwise, have a great rest of the conference, and see you around. Thank you very much.